Hi, this is the Acat review for the management and organizational theory part of the Acat exam. It is 50% of the exam, and I put together some slides here that talk about the subject matter areas that they test on. Okay, so let's present. First slide talks about what is management. Management is a function of, it's actually 4 functions: planning, organizing, leading, and controlling of human and other resources to achieve organizational goals effectively and efficiently. There are 4 functions of management, and these are the 4 well-known functions of management, and we're going to go into what each one is. Managers are the individuals, the men and the women, that are responsible to look at company needs and to properly safeguard the resources. Resources include people, skills, knowledge, and machinery, and anything that they need to get the job done. The difference here is we look at 2 words, efficiency and effectiveness. It's a bit of semantics, but let's look at effectiveness first. It's actually a measurement of the appropriateness of the goals an organization is pursuing and the degree to which they are achieved. So you have to make sure the goals are appropriate, they're matched up and aligned with company resources and talents. Efficiency is a measure of how well or productively resources are used to achieve the goals. You want to make sure there's efficient use of resources to achieve the goal once that goal has been deemed fit for the company to spend its money and time and attention. Managerial function. Managers at all levels in all organizations perform each of the functions of planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. Depending on how high up on the organizational ladder you are, you will be having different times, in other words, different concentrations of planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. Obviously, people on top spend more time planning, because that's their function, they're planners, than actual leading. Leading is more for people that are closer to the employees themselves. But everybody has some sense of each of the 4 functions, and these 4 managerial functions were outlined in Henry Fayol's book, General Industrial Management. The definition of the 4 functions of management. Planning is choosing appropriate organizational goals and courses of action to best achieve those goals. Organizing is establishing task and authority relationships that allow people to work together to achieve those organizational goals. Leading is the function of motivating, coordinating, and energizing individuals, because individuals that are not led properly are not energized, and of course they suffer from a lack of morale. Controlling is establishing accurate measurements, measuring systems and monitoring systems to evaluate how well the organization has achieved its goals. And that's very important, because if an organization does not know if it has achieved its goals, then it does not know whether or not it has been successful in its endeavors or a dismal failure. Planning. Identification and selection of appropriate goals and courses of action. We have to make sure that these goals make sense, that they align with company resources. Steps in the planning process: deciding which goals to pursue, deciding what courses of action to adopt, deciding how to allocate resources. Remember, because resources are rare in nature, and you may have many projects to consider, and remember your example in the finance review, how do you know how much to give each project? Well, each project has to be given a certain degree of importance. And the most important projects, the ones that are quote-unquote on the front burner end of things, have to be given the most attention and the most resources. Those that are not as important are obviously given less attention. Organizing. Process of establishing structure of working relationships in a way that allows organizational members to work together to achieve organizational goals. It's very important to put people in the places that they belong, to put people together and to make sure that they work well. And when we did the original review, we spoke about matching personalities. Just one question. Just make sure this is REC. Make sure you didn't shut it. Yep. Okay. Let's move on. Thank you. Organizational structure is a formal system of tasks and reporting relationships that coordinates and motivates organizational members. Again, and I mentioned this in the first wave of this class, that people are motivated when they feel a sense of organization. Nobody wants to come to work and feel as if they're floating about and they don't have any real sense of direction. So it is your job as a manager to create that framework where people feel not just safe, or physically safe, but feel engaged and to make sure that they have the right kind of work. Leadership, and we had a lively discussion about which of the four is the most important, and I made the argument for leadership being the most important because it's the function that you really can't farm out, can't really have somebody else do it for you. You quote unquote have to breathe on your own, and the same thing, you really have to lead on your own. And leadership is an articulation of a clear vision. That's the first thing. So once a clear vision has been articulated and people know what is expected of them, they respect you as a leader. So therefore, people understand the role that they play in attaining those organizational goals. You make things very, very clear to them. And you will not have what we call role ambiguity. People won't be walking around thinking to themselves, gee, what is it that I do again? What is my role here in this organization? Everybody has to know what's going on. And we use the military as an example of a perfect system for that. Every member of a special forces team, for example, knows what their role is. They know that one guy's the medic, one guy's the explosive expert, the other one is you know, the weapons expert, and that's the way it has to be at work. Everybody has to know what their jobs are and know the roles that they play. And once you know your role and you understand how important your role is, you're better able to then at that point do your job because you feel you're more in control, you know what you're doing. And of course it raises your levels of self-esteem. Leadership involves using power, influence, vision, persuasion, and communication skills. As you all know from your Eastern International case study, communication is vital. If you do not communicate, it is a surefire way of destroying your organization. Communication is probably one of the main reasons that organizations fail besides cash flow issues. Outcome of leadership is highly motivated and committed organizational members. Again, because everybody knows where they're supposed to be. Controlling. Evaluating how well an organization is achieving its goals and taking action to maintain or improve performance. And how does a manager know how to do that? They look at numbers, metrics. They're able to measure whether or not their goals have been attained. Sales forecasts. You know, we planned on making X amount of sales this quarter. Did we reach our goal? Did we not reach our goal? If we did we surpass it? Did we just make it? Are we well below it? Almost there? These are important questions, and you can't answer these questions unless you fully understand what controls are and have a system in place. The outcome of the control process is the ability to measure that performance accurately and regulate efficiency and effectiveness. You're able to, muster up the resources that you need if you see that you're falling below your level of performance, or cut back if you feel that you've overdone it and spent too much money. Evolution of management thought. We had mentioned that much of management theory, the early years, happened at the height of the Industrial Revolution, and there was a tremendous need for managers to have structure of their own because they went from managing small groups to large factories relatively quickly in the sense of history, and they needed tools to get the job done. We spoke about Adam Smith, an 18th century economist, realized that job specialization resulted in much higher efficiency and productivity. Breaking down the total job in its minute details allowed for the division of labor in which workers became very skilled at their specific tasks. And of course we mentioned that there was a problem with this as well, and this problem arose out of the fact that Adam Smith and the like were not looking at employees as human beings, rather as extensions of the actual machines that they were using to produce product. And human beings, I know myself, I can't do the same boring thing over and over again, day in and day out, without losing my mind. I feel like I need variety. And most people need that variety in work because otherwise they won't feel happy. In comes Frederick W. Taylor with the scientific management theory, which was a systematic study of the relationships between people and tasks for the purpose of redesigning the work process for higher efficiency. And in order to have higher efficiency, he looked at all the processes that went into doing each person's job. And as a result, he was able to say things like, well, your factory is not set up correctly. Your machinery is too far apart. These processes that depend on the two tables to the right or to the left are too far away. It takes too much time to get material in. He was able to make those suggestions and, of course, show management how they could reap the benefits of efficiency and effectiveness. However, unfortunately, Taylor failed to look at the employee and his or her needs. Taylor did mention to management that you need to motivate your employees and give them a share of the profits if they do produce more. But remember, not much has changed in corporate America in the sense of greed. We will always have greedy people, and managers were always interested in making more money rather than making happy employees. It wasn't until the 20s and the 30s, really the 30s, where we actually will talk about this. Actually, I don't know if we speak about it in this presentation, but it was the Hawthorne effects that really brought about the importance of the psychological aspect of human beings at work, the relationships between bosses, between managers and their employees. Scientific management was defined by Frederick Taylor in the late 1800s. They wanted to replace the rule of thumb, this unofficial way of looking at things, sought to reduce the time a worker spent on each task by optimizing the way the task was done, thinking of better ways of doing things. And that's the way it would lead to efficiency and effectiveness. A couple of things. Number one, he studied the way jobs are performed now and determined new ways to do them. He fully, intimately understood the work that was being done, and that was the first step. Because you can't make changes of things until you fully understand the current situation. Like if you take over an organization and you want to start seeing who's extra, who's not extra, who do we lay off, who's a good employee, who's a bad employee, you have to go in and see everybody in action before you make your decisions. Unless, of course, you come in with the mindset of, we're going to clean house, replace everybody with a new staff, which is sometimes what people do. I don't necessarily agree with that because I'm a big believer, if it's not broken, don't fix it. And many times you'll have a lot of talent at work and you don't want to get rid of talent. You want to think things through carefully. He gathered detailed time and motion information, and he tried different methods to see which is the best method for this. He codified the new methods into rules. He taught all these rules to the employees, so everybody was on the same page. Selected employees whose skills matched the rules. Right person, right role. Very, very important to have the right kind of person. A personable person belongs in customer service. It doesn't belong on a forklift somewhere in the back office moving boxes. If he's got a personality, he can be a salesperson, a saleswoman, a salesman. So you got to match the right people with the right jobs, and everybody has certain skill sets that they're born with or they've picked up throughout their lives, and they have to be properly matched with the employee, with the job. He also spoke about establishing fair levels of performance and pay premiums for higher performance. This, unfortunately, was not taken seriously by management, or they chose to ignore it, kind of like a selective hearing kind of thing. And workers should have benefited from the higher output, but unfortunately did not as a result of that. Problems with scientific management: managers frequently implemented only the increased output of Taylor's plan. Workers did not share in the increased output. Specialized jobs became very boring and very dull. Workers ended up distrusting this whole concept of scientific management. Workers could purposely underperform, and we spoke about the concept of soldiering, which was done in the steel industry, where employees purposely slowed down. And managers, instead of trying to see, there's a problem here, let's figure out why they're doing this, they didn't even realize why they're doing it because they themselves didn't understand the work process. The worst part of management is that when you have people that are managers that don't really know the job. And it's absolutely mind-boggling to me how many times I've seen it in my own career. Well, I'll have a boss in a job and he or she has no idea of how to do the job. So instead of just pretending to be quiet and pretending to know something and relying on you, they put in their 2 cents, and as they talk, they make themselves look more ignorant and more ignorant. And that's what happens in many places. And that's exactly what happened here. Employees underperformed. The manager said, you're going to underperform, but we're going to speed you up through machinery. And it became a battle royale between management and employees. And in this time period, you had the rise of unions, strikes, a lot of violence occurred in this time period as a result of this. Now we have another way of looking at management. We spoke about the scientific aspect of management, understanding the actual work itself, the relationship between man and woman and the machinery and the work environment. Now we're going to look at the administrative management theory section. Administrative management was the study of how to create an organizational structure that leads to high efficiency and effectiveness. How is this accomplished? It is accomplished through structure. How are we set up as a business to do business? In comes Max Weber. He developed the concept of bureaucracy. We mentioned that the word bureaucracy, we envision long lines at the DMV or some other wonderfully run government entity where everybody speaks the language of no and everybody's just giving you a hard time. Actually, bureaucracy was intended to make things easy. The intention of bureaucracy was to make things more orderly. How was this intended? Well, 4 different things that Weber spoke about. Number 1, a system of written rules and standard operating procedures that specified how employees should behave. It was very important for him to have a standardized approach to things, not to have this willy-nilly, everybody does their own thing. It's not like musicians that come together and then have what we call a jam session. He wanted everybody to be under the same set of rules, and for that to happen, you need to have standard operating procedures, and of course, he borrowed that from Taylor, as we said in the previous slides. Clearly specified hierarchy of authority. Everybody knew who was on top and who was whose boss. That's very important. We gave the example on the initial rounds of this review class. We spoke about the military and how the military is very much predicated on the fact that you have a general, you have a colonel, you have a major. And the general's not going to give a private an order, based on the fact, oh, he saw you rust the bayonet, that's it, drop down and give me 20 push-ups as a punishment for that. That's not the job of a general, that's the job of a sergeant. So everybody has to know their roles, everybody has to know who reports to whom. And that's a very, very important thing. And of course, you can't have, and I'm telling you this from a management perspective, I've been working in management for almost 20 years, you can't have somebody report to 2 people at the same time. It is not good for the employee, nor is it good for the employer. It causes a lot of confusion, animosity, and a lot of unnecessary stress. Also, selection and evaluation system that rewards employees fairly and equitably. You want to make sure that when people get a bonus, it's because they're good employees, they've done well. You can't give everybody a bonus if everybody's not performing well. And you can't choose people for jobs based on nepotism or some other outside factor that's not related to work. And that's exactly what Weber spoke about. Now, here's another thing. Clearly specified system of task and role relationships. Again, order, understanding your task and your role and how it interacts. So there's a little bit of Taylor here as well. Remember, they lived on opposite sides of the world. He was European, I believe. Taylor was American. I think he was American. Perhaps he was English. I don't remember his nationality. But it doesn't matter. The point is they didn't have Facebook and Twitter, and they couldn't pick up their cell phones and say, hey guys, let's have a powwow and let's talk about management theory. So that's why you'll see a crossover, a lot of connection between theorists, and each one builds upon the other one. Weber's principles were predicated on a manager's formal authority coming from his position or her position in the organization. In other words, if we look at the organizational hierarchy over here, we see Stephen Roft occupies this box. And on this box, Professor Roft, it says Director of Operations. So therefore, if I'm Director of Operations, I can go over to you, the Assistant Director of Operations, and give you a set of instructions. Why? Not just because I'm your boss, it's because I occupy that piece in the organizational hierarchy called Director of Operations. So identify the fact that I occupy that box gives me the authority, the hierarchy where I sit in the hierarchy of command, that gives me the authority to give you orders and give you directives. And then you have people underneath, and the assistant director has people underneath her or him to do jobs, and he or she has the right and the duty to tell them what to do. And of course we go down the hierarchy until we reach the employees that are on the ground level. Positions in the firm should be held based on performance, not social standing, and this is an ongoing issue. It's a very utopian idea, I like it, but if you look at certain industries, it reeks of nepotism. And nepotism has its ups and downs. Of course, it's good in a sense that you have family members that are involved, and of course, if a family member wants to continue this business, make sure that it's there the year after and the year after that, they should be taking a special interest in that business and do their jobs differently than an employee who's just a 9-to-5er. But again, family businesses or nepotism, shall I say, have problems because then you're not hiring objectively, you're hiring a son-in-law who could be complete idiot to do the job just because you have your daughter to contend with. And that can be dangerous for operations. And also, you don't want to hire a family member who is incompetent, not give them any responsibility, let them sit pretty in an office somewhere, because that's not productive. It's not the way to do things. 3, the extent of each position's formal responsibilities and its relationships to other positions should be clearly specified. Again, clarity. Understand who you are, what your job is, and what you need to do. Authority can be exercised effectively. Positions are arranged hierarchically. It's easily seen, easily understood, and that's the way positions should be set up. 5, managers must create a well-defined system of rules, operating procedures, and norms so that they can effectively control behavior. You cannot control behavior unless everybody understands what is expected of them. You have to tell them, you have to be here at 9 o'clock in the morning. If you're here at 9:05, you're going to be docked. You're here at 9:10, you'll be written up. People have to know that. You can't just throw things at them. It has to be clearly specified and explained to them, especially when they come in for the very first time. You have to have a very good onboarding and new employee orientation process. Rules are formal written instructions that specify actions to be taken under different circumstances. These rules then get bunched together into standard operating procedures where you have a recipe of how to get things done. You have a purchase order, you generate the purchase order, it's signed off by the manager, who then has it signed off by his director. If it's above a certain amount of money, the VP of the department has to get involved. Those are examples of standard operating procedures, and it's standard. Nobody has to scratch their heads and wonder, what do I do at this point? Everybody knows that if it's 0 to 5,000, it's one procedure, 5,000 to 20,000, another procedure. If it's above 10,000, then you need a bidding process. That's a procedure. How do you do that? You put it together. You put these rules together in a way where employees know exactly what they have to do. Norms are unwritten informal codes of conduct that prescribe how people should act in particular situations. We have social norms, right? Bump into somebody, we say excuse me, we say thank you and please. You also have that in business. They may not be written down, but if somebody asks you for assistance at work, it's the right thing to do to go over to them and help them out. That's a norm. That's expected of you. Teamwork is an expected thing. Whether or not it happens is another story, but the truth is, you have a lot of norms at work. It may be something within the culture of the organization, where the norm of that particular organization is to work from 9 to 8, from 9 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock at night. And the people leaving at 6 are looked down upon as people that are shirking their duties. Again, certain things that are not written in stone, certain things that are written in stone. Henry Fayol believed in a couple of different principles. Let's look at them. Number 1, and again, you'll see some of them appearing in other theorists' lists of things to do or not to do. Division of labor. He understood the importance of that, which allowed for job specialization. Jobs can have too much specialization, leading to poor quality and worker dissatisfaction. So you have to balance that. It's good to have specialization, but you have to have some variety. Authority and responsibility, both formal and informal authority resulting from special expertise. And sometimes at a job, if somebody has special expertise, he or she then becomes a leader in a sense as a result of that. Unity of command. Employees should have only one boss. The more bosses you have for one person, the more it's not efficient to have 3 people leading one person. From a corporate stance, it doesn't make any sense. But moreover than that, it's important to understand that people get stressed out if you have too many people to answer to. And one person, I answer to you, 3 people answer to that one person, 10 people, whatever the setup is, but you have to have that in place. Line of authority should be a clear chain of command from top to bottom of the firm. Again, this smells of Max Weber a bit. Centralization he spoke about. The degree to which authority rests at the top of the organization, and we understand that if an organization is too centralized, then what ends up happening is it takes a long time to get decisions made, and sometimes you must have a decision right away. And good managers, one of the hallmarks of a good manager is somebody who knows how to delegate. And just from my experience in management, I've seen a lot of managers that are micromanagers. They cannot delegate. Whether it's the fact that they're insecure, they're afraid that if they delegate, they're hollowing out their capabilities and making themselves not needed. Again, I'm not here to discuss the psychology of people. People have different motives and different feelings. Maybe they have low self-esteem. If they give it to somebody else, they feel like they're not competent. But whatever the case is that it's very important to be very clear with people and, give over things to do. You can't do everything yourself. So too much centralization is not good. You need a direction, a single plan of action to guide the organization. You can't have multiple plans. You can't be going north and south at the same time. Pick a direction and then go with it. And then if it doesn't work, change direction, but don't go in two directions at the same time. Don't give employees contradictory things to do, tasks to do, because that's not going to be effective or efficient. Equity is fairness, provision of justice, and the fair and impartial treatment of all employees, not giving one employee favoritism over the other. Order is the arrangement of employees where they will be of the most value to the organization. Initiative is the fostering of creativity and innovation by encouraging employees to act on their own. And initiative is very, very important. Initiative is what you will see when we'll speak about later, theory X and theory Y, making sure that people do things on their own. Nobody wants to manage people that have to be told what to do at every given moment. I mean, I'm talking from experience where I've had employees that just didn't want to be, didn't want to have initiative, and I had to tell them everything all the time. And it gets on your nerves, it's not time efficient, and of course, you don't want employees like that. Discipline, obedient, applied, respectful employees are necessary. Defiance at work, unacceptable. If somebody challenges you based on ethical standards, that's one thing. If somebody challenges you because they don't feel like doing it, let somebody else do it. Well, as I told you in my own personal experience, I've had to let some people go as a result of their insubordination. And just as a little footnote, insubordination at the workplace can make you lose your benefits, your unemployment benefits. And that's exactly what happened in that story I told you about when we went over this for the first time. I had an employee who I asked him to do a job, and he refused flat out, I'm not doing that. And I had to notify him that he no longer had a job. And when we went to fight in court, that was my constant battle. He was insubordinate, he was insubordinate, he was insubordinate. Subordination is just cause for losing one's unemployment benefits. And you can go to the Department of Labor's website and see there's other conditions as well that will make you lose your benefits. But insubordination is unacceptable at the workplace. Remuneration of personnel is a fancy way of saying people have to be paid properly. And if you remember, your principles of management, we spoke about Victor Vroom and principles of management and motivation. It is key to give people proper payment, because otherwise they will not be motivated. Stability of tenure of personnel. In simple, clear English, that means job security. People, as you can see from your case study of EI, if people worry about their job security, that's going to cause them to malfunction at work and to do things that they would never have done before. But because of their nerves, they're not thinking clearly, they're too busy wondering if their job is going to be there tomorrow, they can't focus on getting the job done. So what you want to do is, as a manager, is to create a framework where job security is there and all the time. It's easier said than done. And that's a challenge that we have in today's day and age when we have corporate buyouts and companies that are merging. We know that when companies merge or they partner with other firms, there is going to be collateral damage and people will lose their jobs, especially those that cannot adapt to the new regime. That's the harsh truth, hard truth that we see today. Subordination of individual interest to the common interest sounds almost reeks of communism, but in a sense it is. In the sense that you as an employee have to put your personal needs to the side and focus on what the organization needs itself. And sometimes that means that, pushing off a vacation by a week, not taking that day off, coming in on the weekends to do your job. Even though you don't want to do that, it may not be within your to-do list, but because the organization needs it and you know the organization needs it, you should be dedicated to the needs of the organization. And this comes at a price. You expect to be remunerated properly for that. If your boss just wants you to come in and work extra hours and not pay you for it, then that's crazy. So it has to work both ways. Esprit de corps, a fancy French word here, which refers to camaraderie or comradeship, shared enthusiasm, and foster devotion to the common cause. And that can only happen if people are working well together and put their needs to the side and look at look at the organizational needs. Theory X and Theory Y, Douglas McGregor. Again, these are assumptions, and we'll just mention it quickly so that we can move on in the slides. Theory X is an assumption that employees or people in general are naturally lazy. And when you have employees that are naturally lazy, You're going to have to monitor them very closely, give them very, very clear instructions, not give them any wiggle room, and just make them do their jobs very, very meticulously by standing over them. And again, this is very, very inefficient, but sometimes necessary because, again, it depends on the nature of the people that you are managing. Some people like to be managed like that, actually. Theory-wise, the polar opposite, where people are not considered lazy, and as a result, you have trust in them, and given the right framework, the right environment, the right amount of resources, training, etc., you will have a highly motivated work staff. Self-motivated work staff that needs very little direction and very little management, which is very good if you can make it happen. We just went through these slides. Again, we spoke about this slide as well. This is a review of what we just said. Now, management science theory is an approach to management that uses rigorous quantitative techniques to maximize the use of organizational resources. You're using a lot of math to figure things out. You have something called TQM, Total Quality Management, which is a focus on analyzing the input, which are the raw materials that are put in to produce, the conversion of those raw materials to final product and output. And you're looking at everything and anything that goes into making a quality product. You know, we've heard the term garbage in, garbage out. What does that mean? If you put in bad product, bad input, don't expect to have a good product. So it is a mindset and philosophy of Dennings and Feigenbaum. Management information systems are computer systems that provide information vital for effective decision making. In order to make an effective decision, you need to have information, accurate information, a wealth of information, not a dearth of information. You have to have enough information to make your decision. And once you have that, then you have to make the decision. We as human beings are limited to the amount of information that we can handle. Some of us can handle more information, some of us are better at number crunching, so we need the assistance of computers and their software to get this job done. The organizational environment are the set of forces and conditions that operate beyond an organization's boundaries, but affect the manager's ability to acquire and utilize resources. And we gave the example of the tsunami that hit Japan a couple of years ago. Nobody could have predicted it. Nobody was able to contend with it. It was what it was. Japanese industry was wiped out for all intents and purposes. That means that your Honda, your Toyota, and all the other wonderful Japanese cars that you drive, well, you couldn't get them. Or if you could get them, they were very expensive because the parts that were needed were not able to be made. And these are things that you couldn't handle as a manager, you couldn't predict, you couldn't plan. Okay, this is just a review of the slide. I'm sorry for that. A mechanistic structure, or a business structure, is where authority is centralized and there's very little room given for people to manage or to think on their own. That is indicative of a Theory X environment. Employees are closely monitored, managed, and can be very efficient in a stable environment. Because if you have a stable environment, you don't have to worry about decisions that have to be made on the spot. If you have a centralized decision-making process, so be it. It's no problem because you have a very rudimentary or very primitive business. I don't know, you have a bunch of people digging ditches for you. It doesn't really require a lot of TLC and understanding what people need. People need a shovel and they need to dig. It doesn't really take much skill in doing that. Not going to talk about career enhancement and giving people a pleasant work environment in a ditch digging detail. It's not a pleasant job, it's a hard job. So perhaps in a ditch digging detail, you need a Theory X kind of management style. Theory Y is very nice for an organic structure, a structure that is quote unquote alive. Control has to be looser. Shared norms are what you rely on. People expect things from you. Works best when an environment is unstable and rapidly changing. You have a bunch of creative people working together in a finance company. Things change on the moment. Everybody has to be given room to breathe and the ability to make decisions. Now we'll talk about values, attitudes, emotions, and culture. The manager as a person. We've said that Taylor, Weber, all these quote-unquote old-fashioned management theorists forgot about the employee for all intents and purposes. Now we're going to look at the employer or the manager as a human being. People have different feelings as far as how much they control in life. I'm not going to get into religious discussion of this, but some people feel like they're in charge, and what they do or don't do has a tremendous impact on what happens at work. That is known as the internal locus of control. It's a belief that you are responsible for your own fate, and as a result, your actions or inactions and your behaviors, good or bad, are determinants of job outcomes, whether favorable outcomes or unfavorable and failed missions. The external locus of control is the polar opposite of that. It's a belief that outside forces are responsible for what happens to and around them, and people do not think their own actions make much of a difference. And when you don't think what you do makes much of a difference, guess what? That's the way you behave. You don't care about your work as much because you say, have this fatalistic kind of attitude like, what's the difference? I can't do anything about it anyway. Self-esteem is the degree to which people feel good about themselves and their abilities. High self-esteem causes a person to feel confident and capable. Persons with low self-esteem have poor opinions of themselves and their abilities. Values describe what managers try to achieve through work and how they think they should behave. Attitudes capture managers' thoughts and feelings about their specific jobs and organizations. And moods and emotions encompass how managers actually feel when they are managing. And we all know when the boss is in a good mood, things move differently. When the boss is in a bad mood, things look and feel different. Emotional intelligence, otherwise known as EI, is very similar to IQ. In the sense we measure a person's intelligence through the intelligence quotient. This is the emotional version of that. Do people know how to control themselves? How much do they know how to control themselves? And you cannot control others if you cannot control yourself. Because remember, employees are almost like a mirror image of you. If you're acting a certain way, if you're flying off the handle, they're going to fly off the handle, making your job that much more difficult. Organizational culture are shared sets of beliefs, expectations, values, norms, and work routines that influence how members of an organization relate to one another and work together to achieve organizational goals. In an organizational culture, where organizational members share an intense commitment to cultural values, beliefs, and routines, a strong organizational culture exists. When members are not committed to a shared set of values, beliefs, and routines, organizational culture is then considered to be weak. Terminal values signify what an organization and its employees are trying to accomplish. Instrumental values guide the way in which the organization and its members achieve those organizational goals. So terminal, God forbid the word terminal means somebody's no chance of recovering. So just to remember, it's an easy way. Remember, terminal is, what's the end game? What are we trying to figure out over here? And instrumental values, what do you need? What is instrumental to you? What are the things that you need, the tools that you need to get the job done? Managers determine and shape organizational culture through the kinds of values and norms they promote in an organization. Again, leadership is very important over here, understanding how one's leadership or the lack thereof can impact. And again, referencing the EI case that was assigned to you in your case study, you see that lack of leadership, lack of communication has tremendously negative impact points. Ethics and social responsibility. Ethics are the inner guiding moral principles, values, and beliefs that people use to analyze or interpret a situation and then decide what is the right or appropriate way to behave. It is your internal GPS. It gives you the ability to say, okay, I have a situation in front of me, I have what's called an ethical dilemma. How do I react? I find a wallet on the floor, right? Has somebody's address. I could return it to them empty or full. Then your ethics kick in and say, listen, I know that God has intended I make $50,000 this year. If I make $51,000 this way, that $1,000 will disappear from another way. My boiler will go, or my car will need a repair. And that's where your ethics comes in. And ethics have multiple sources: religion, upbringing, etc. So your ethics is your inner guiding moral principle. It helps you make decisions right or wrong. Ethical beliefs lead to the development of law and regulation to prevent certain behaviors and encourage others. Laws can change or disappear as ethical beliefs change. And again, looking at man-made law or man-made ethics, that's exactly what happens. And look at society. 60, 70 years ago, we mentioned the example of abortion was looked upon as murder, and nobody could even think about that in the medical world. If you were an abortion doctor, you were considered a murderer and a criminal. In today's day and age, people accept it. And if somebody bombs an abortion clinic today, they're the murderer. Whereas if 70 years ago they bombed an abortion clinic, they probably would have gotten, all for a slap on the wrist. Look at how ethics change. Look at how we view what is right and what is wrong within a span of less than a century, less than a half a century. Interesting note to ponder. Stakeholders, people and groups that supply a company with its productivity, resources, and have a claim on its resources. Stakeholders and ethics, when the law does not specify how companies should behave, managers must decide what is the right or ethical way to behave toward the people and groups affected by their action. They have to go above and beyond what is expected of them, or they'll just do what is the minimum, depending on their viewpoint of ethics. These are the types of stakeholders. Employees have expectations, stockholders have expectations, suppliers and distributors, community, society, international state, nation state, customers, and of course managers. Stockholders, what do they want? To ensure that managers are behaving ethically and not risking investors' capital by engaging in actions that could hurt the company's reputation. They want to maximize their return on investment. They don't want money squandered. They don't want money wasted on silly, frivolous ventures. Managers are responsible for using a company's financial capital and human resources to increase its performance. They have the right to expect a good return or reward by investing their human capital to improve a company's performance. Right? You work hard, you stay late, you expect a bonus at the end of the year. If I get nothing out of the position, just more responsibility without money, that's not good for motivation. People have to get motivated, they have to get green motivation at times, if you know what I mean. Frequently juggle multiple interests as a result of that. Organizational ethics, guiding practices and beliefs through which a particular company and its managers view their responsibility toward their stakeholders. Top managers play a crucial role in determining a company's ethics. If a manager is unethical, then of course the organization as a whole will be unethical. Social responsibility is a way a company views its duty or obligation to make decisions that protect, enhance, and promote the welfare and well-being of stakeholders and society as a whole. It is an unwritten contract between society and business that either side will not do anything to harm the other. Managing in a global environment. Task environment are the set of forces and conditions that originate with suppliers, distributors, customers, and competitors. Affect an organization's ability to obtain inputs and dispose of its outputs, and they are the most immediate effect. We had this slide already before, but now we see it in a sense of a global concept. Suppliers, we know, are the individuals or groups that provide organizations with the input, raw materials. They want to be paid on time. And having worked in an industry where I did help out with collections, people don't pay their bills on time. Not only because they can't, but there are people that are unethical and they don't want to. And they have to be coaxed into paying on time. Perhaps they won't pay on time until they call in an order and you refuse to give it to them. And then they say, fine, we'll pay everything up. That's not ethical. Suppliers want to feel that they are being taken care of. Relationship with suppliers can be difficult due to material shortages. Okay? Suppliers that are the sole source of a critical item are in a strong bargaining position. They can charge more. There's nobody else to go to. And managers can reduce these supplier effects by increasing the number of suppliers of an input. Again, it's good old-fashioned competition. If I can get the material from somebody else, right, you can't deliver by 7 in the morning, I'll go to somebody else who can deliver by 7 in the morning. There you go. But if you're the only show in town, then I really don't have a choice. Then I have to get things from you and only you, and it makes things more difficult. Distributors are the organizations that help other organizations sell their goods or services to customers. Powerful distributors can limit access to markets through its control of customers in those markets. Managers can counter the effects of distributors by seeking alternative distribution channels. Customers are the individual groups that buy goods and services that an organization produces. Identify an organization's main customers and producing the goods and services they want is crucial to organizational and managerial success. Knowing who's who is very important in any industry. Competitors, potentially the most difficult or the strongest force out there is the organizations that produce goods and services that are similar.
to a particular organization's goods and services. Potential competitors are the organizations that presently are not in the task environment but could enter if they so choose to. Strong competitive rivalry results in price competition, and falling prices reduce access to resources and lower profits. Rivalry between competitors is potentially the most threatening force that exists in a manager's environment, because many times you can't control what competition does. You may want to go forward, but you can't because you don't have the resources to come up with the latest cutting-edge technology. Well, others will have those resources. Barriers to entry are those factors that make it difficult and costly for the organization to enter a particular task environment. So if you want to enter a business environment and there's a tremendous amount of rivalry between businesses, and if you were to enter or think of entering, they would put up a fight, a massive fight to prevent you from entering. It'll make your prospects of entering that particular business arena that much more difficult. Economies of scale, cost advantages associated with large operations. They can buy things much cheaper than you can. They can buy things much cheaper than you can, bigger quantities. They can lower the cost of making something and sell it for the same price as you, but they will be capturing more profit than you will, or they can make it cheaper than you, much cheaper than you, lead you out. Brand loyalty is another thing that you have to contend with. Customers' preference for the products of organizations currently existing in the task environment. It's very difficult. If you're an Apple person, and again, I'm not advertising for Apple, it's going to be hard to get you to go to Samsung. Or if you're a Samsung person, it's going to be hard to get you to Apple. And those are pre-existing loyalties. And those are things that new entrants have to contend with. And of course, the pesky and annoying government regulations that impede entry. They make it very difficult. If you want to open up a new hospital, well, guess what? There's a moratorium against hospitals, a moratorium against making new nursing homes. Or if you want to make a new hospital, you have to go through so many hoops, have very deep pockets, and a tremendous amount of knowledge in legal affairs to do that. And of course, that's why you don't see new hospitals popping up on a daily basis. In fact, you see the opposite. Hospitals are closing. That's a whole story in and of itself. So barriers to entry, competition, you have economies of scale, and of course brand loyalty. These create barriers to entry, and as such, it deters potential competitors. The more difficult it is to get into an industry, that, in my opinion, is an indication to us that that industry is very lucrative. People are not letting you come in. People don't want to share with you. Values about what a society believes to be good, desirable, and beautiful. Right? You look at a society that values materialism, beauty, then you know that that's their value system. It provides conceptual support for democracy, truth, appropriate roles for men and women. Usually not static but very slow to change. It takes decades, but when it changes and you look back, you'll say, wow, look at how things have changed. Norms are unwritten rules and codes of conduct that prescribe how people should act in particular situations. Folkways are routine social conventions of daily life. Mores are behavioral norms that are considered central to functioning society. Rules against theft, for example. And norms vary from country to country and religion to religion. Whereas in one country, if you do a crime, you can get many years in jail or some other harsh corporal punishment. Whereas in this country, the same thing will land you in jail for 6 weeks as opposed to 6 years. And again, norms, laws, all these things vary from country to country. Hofstede, I saw his name mentioned on the Acat. He looks at different conditions within a country's way of doing things, things that are norms. Some countries, the norms is individualism, which is a worldview that values individual freedom and self-expression and holds a strong belief in personal rights and the need for persons to be judged by their achievements rather than their social background. Collectivism is a worldview that values subordination of the individual to the goals of the group. Widespread under communism and very prevalent in Japan, where peer pressure plays a great role in controlling the way that people behave at work. If everybody on the team looks at you if you don't perform as, okay, you're an underperformer, that's not good. You're going to perform a certain way because you feel pressure to do so. Power distance is the distance between the rich and the poor. If there's a tremendous amount of distance, high power distance, you are living in a very poor country where there's a lot of poor people and a few rich people. The book gives examples, Panama and Malaysia. Low power distance countries is where the government steps in and creates social programs to mitigate the effects of poverty, and then they close the gap between the rich and the poor by giving welfare, Medicaid, things of that nature. And again, this is vital because you can't have a bunch of poor, hungry people, starving people running around the country, but a few rich people. Otherwise, you may have a French Revolution on your hands, and that's exactly what happened in history in the past. You have to make sure that the wealth is spread in a fair way. I'm not going to go into that because then I don't want to be branded as a communist or a socialist. Let's move on. Achievement versus nurturing orientation. Achievement-oriented societies value assertiveness, performance, and success, and are result-oriented. Internal locus of control, get things done. Nurturing-oriented cultures value quality of life, personal relationships, and service. The United States and Japan are achievement-oriented. Sweden and Denmark are more nurturing-oriented environments. Some countries are into risk, some countries are not into risk. Uncertainty avoidance. Societies and people differing in their tolerance for uncertainty and risk. Low uncertainty avoidance cultures value diversity and tolerate a wide range of opinions. High uncertainty avoidance societies are more rigid and expect high conformity in their citizens' beliefs and norms of behavior. Long-term outlook, savings. Some people have savings, some people don't have savings. I'm not going to go around the class and ask you how many of you have an IRA, started their retirement funds. I'm going to eventually say very few of you have, because you're still young, you have 40, 50 years or so ahead of you before you have to worry about retirement. And I have some friends like that haven't even started saving for retirement and they're in their 40s. So go figure. But that depends on an individual's culture and outlook, but also depends heavily on the culture. For example, countries like Taiwan and Hong Kong have a long-term outlook. They're into saving, right? One day you'll need the money. Short-term outlook is live in the now. The United States, for example, France, value the ability to spend your money, enjoy your life. Again, neither one is really good in and of itself. You don't want to be too extreme. You don't want to become miserly. There's such a long-term outlook. You'll die at the age of 95 with $3 million in your bank account, living in a dirty, stinky apartment with ripped clothes. And then the government gets your money anyway. And there are people, unfortunately, like that. I've heard of stories where old individuals die in their apartments when they come in there and clean up. They have stocks and bonds from 50 or 60 years ago that were worth millions and millions of dollars. Now, who gets it? The state gets it. What's the point of that? At the same time, you don't want to be too much of a spendthrift and then lose all your money because you ate out every minute and you spent money on vacations and homes that you didn't need or clothing that you didn't need, etc., etc. I'm not lecturing people on how to live their lives, but again, this is what we have to contend with. Decision making is the process by which managers respond to opportunities and threats by analyzing options and making decisions about goals. Sometimes it's a response to an opportunity that comes your way. Sometimes you make a decision, must make a decision because of threats that come your way. If a threat comes your way, you have to make a decision on the spot. You can't say, well, we'll do it tomorrow. Business threat comes your way, you must contend with it because it could have the potential to destroy the organization. Program decision is a decision that has been made many, many times over. It takes very little time in making that. A non-program decision would be the opposite, something that doesn't happen that often, which would make your search for information that much more difficult, and you would have to look for many alternatives as such. As we just said over here. Intuition is, quote unquote, the gut feeling. You feel something, and as a result of that intuition, you act on it. Again, sometimes you have no choice. We all know that women have a sixth sense, and sometimes they feel something. But in business, a sixth sense is not enough in making a decision. You need other things in addition to that. And that is reasoned judgment, where you actually evaluate all your alternatives, or as many alternatives as you can get in front of you. You make a judgment based on information that you gathered, which makes sense, and not making a willy-nilly kind of, okay, sounds good enough, let's make a decision. Very, very important to make decisions based on reasoned judgment. Classical model of decision-making assumes, again, it's dangerous when you assume things because then you leave things out. That the decision-maker can identify and evaluate all possible alternatives and their consequences and then rationally choose one over the other. And that takes a lot of gray matter. You have to be really bright, really amazingly bright to be able to do that. Or you could be dull and just have a very, very primitive work environment and not have that many alternatives to choose from. But clearly the classical model of decision-making is not something that really makes a lot of sense in today's day and age. A couple of steps in decision-making. You've got to look at the legality of it, whether or not something's ethical. We've already said many times the difference between legality and ethicalness. Legality is the minimum
the minimum that is expected of an individual in society by law. Ethicalness always involves going beyond and above what the plain law says. It's got to be economically feasible. You've got to have the money, the funds to do it, and of course, it's got to be practical, because if it's not practical, it's not getting done. Implement your chosen alternative and then learn from feedback. If you don't learn from feedback and you don't look at things, you don't see where things went wrong or could have gone better, then of course you are cheating yourself. Vertical integration, you can go backward or forward in the supply chain, the value chain. You can either go more towards the inputs, so we gave the example of Coca-Cola buying a sugarcane plant, that's backward. Coca-Cola were to buy a bottling plant, a fleet of trucks, that's forward, it's closer to the end user. Problem with getting too vertically integrated is that if you're too vertically integrated, then of course, if the business goes sour, you're stuck with a lot of infrastructure you have to get rid of. It's kind of hard to sell sugarcane plantation in Brazil, wherever, Argentina, wherever they grow sugarcane. It's not easy to sell off a whole fleet of trucks either. So you have to be sure that the business will be successful before you start integrating heavily. Value chain management, we spoke about TQM. It's a company-wide management style. It's a philosophy created by Demings, Joanne, and Feigenbaum, and it's a philosophy that customers define the quality. And once you have a clear definition of what customers want and what they define as quality, then you, as a manager, can craft a TQM organization that strives to make the grade of what the customer expects you to reach. A couple of things in a TQM shop, so to speak. Build organizational commitment to quality. Everybody has to be on the same page. Everybody has to want quality. You can't have people that are lukewarm in the realm of quality. Focus on the customer. Find ways to measure quality. Set goals and create incentives. Solicit input from employees, which is very important. You always want to have input from employees. If you don't have input from employees, you then are, closing yourself. You are, preventing yourself from getting good input. Identify defects and trace to the source. If you have that, you have a barcode on all the parts of your car. If there's a defect, then you can say, okay, do we need to do a total recall of things, or is this a specific plan or a specific set of employees in a specific shift? They're not doing their job. Just-in-time inventory controls inventory by being tied into the suppliers tied into the customer's inventory system, and they're able to deliver things. They know when they're running low on certain items. And we gave many examples of that. Of course, that lowers your inventory costs, your holding costs, you have better cash flow. And you have there's less of a chance that the product will take a walk or get damaged. Workers work closely with suppliers, designed for ease of production and break down barriers between functions. In other words, make sure you don't have any silos between departments. Nobody feels that they are their own thing. Human resources, highly skilled workers whose jobs require working in teams. You have highly skilled workers, you have to manage them more in a loose fashion. Job design is a process by which managers decide how to divide tasks into specific jobs. The appropriate division of labor results in an effective and efficient workforce. Job simplification is when a job is too complicated, too many tasks, one person can't get it done. You reduce the task of each worker. Too much simplification is not good. It leads to boredom. Job enlargement, increasing the number of tasks. Job enrichment is increasing responsibility. I can give you tasks, scan this document, scan this document, file that document, and give you many menial, boring tasks. That won't necessarily make you more engaged in your work. But if I give you more responsibility, and of course more money to go along with that responsibility, that's a different story. This is called the job characteristics model. Skill, variety, autonomy, feedback, then feed into these, which are called the job characteristics, then feed into the psychological states. You experience meaningfulness of work when you have skill variety. Autonomy makes you feel responsible for your work outcomes and have more of an internal locus of control. Feedback, knowledge of your work results, all lead to high motivation, high performance, and of course a high level of satisfaction. Tall and flat structures. A tall structure is a structure where you have many layers of managers between managers. And of course, there's a problem with that. The taller structures, you have the tendency for information to get distorted on the way down. A flat structure is the opposite. You have more people reporting to managers as opposed to the tall structure, which has many layers of managers that only have a few people reporting to them. Of course, it's better for communication, but harder on the manager who has more people to contend with.
Now, in organizational structure, managers should carefully evaluate, does the organization have the right number of middle managers? Can it be filtered down? Can we get rid of some people? Also look at whether or not we're centralized or decentralized. Decentralization puts more authority at lower levels. Too much of that is not good either, because then you can have rogue behavior. People start making decisions that you don't want them to make. So you as the manager have to set limits. Management by objective is a process where employee and employer sit down together and then decide on what is to be done, how it's to be done, and fair ways to measure performance. And of course, an employee's performance is measured at certain times. Every 6 months, every year, and of course, the employee signs off on it, that he or she is going to do his job this way. So this way they have input. So when you have input in what you're to do, there's less of, well, had you let me do it my way, I would have done it much better. This way, we're giving you the option to put your 2 cents in, and this way, if you don't do what you say you would do, then it's a deficiency in you as the employee. Organizational learning is a process through which managers try to increase organizational members' abilities to understand and appropriately respond to changing conditions. It is what we call the impetus of change. It is what pushes change. It can help members make decisions about changes, motivation, and performance. Thank you. Just get in. It sounds like an entire U2 song. Okay, thanks. If you don't mind just shutting the phone off, I'll just have to be unavailable. Okay, thank you. Expectancy theory, Victor Vroom. Okay, name another famous person in management. Motivation will be high when workers believe high levels of effort will lead to high performance. High performance will lead to the attainment of desired outcomes. Okay, you have to believe in yourself. Quote the Mets in the 1960s, you gotta believe. Major factors of motivation, expectancy, the belief that effort input will result in a certain level of performance. Instrumentality is the belief that performance results in the attainment of outcomes. Valence is how much the person, the employee, values the prize at the end of the day. I gave the example. If you're working very hard and I tell you, you know what, you really, really work hard, I'll buy you a tuna fish sandwich. And you, the employee, looks at the boss, is like, have you fallen off your bed this morning? Did you hit your head on the ground? Tuna fish sandwich, is that how you're going to reward me? Giving somebody a $20 bonus at the end of the year is the same thing. If you're not going to give something that people value, then don't give it at all. You're better off not doing that because that insults people. Employees will work hard if they believe they can attain high performance. If you feel that no matter how hard you work, you're not going to get anywhere, you're not going to do it. Instrumentality, workers are only motivated if they think performance leads to an outcome. Managers must link performance to outcomes. If you don't, then you don't have a motivated workforce. And again, workers have preferences for outcomes. One person needs an extra week of vacation. That's his bonus. Another person needs recognition. That's his or her bonus. One person loves money. That's his or her bonus. Another person may want to be promoted. That's his or her bonus. Motivation is highest when expectancy, instrumentality, and valence are high. If one of these values is low, then you are having a low motivation problem. Teams and groups. A group is 2 or more people who interact with each other to accomplish certain goals or meet certain needs. A team is more cohesive. A group whose members work intensely with each other to achieve a specific common goal or objective. All teams are groups, but not all groups are teams. Teams often are difficult to form. It takes time for members to learn how to work together. Communication is the sharing. Communication is the sharing of information between 2 or more individuals or groups to reach a common understanding. Importance of good communication, increased efficiency in new technologies and skills, improved quality of products and services, increased responsiveness to customers, more innovation through communication. The process of communication, the different phases of communication, transmission phase, and this is where a lot of the mess-ups in communication happen, when things are not transmitted clearly. And of course, feedback is very important. And that's when you know whether or not the communication was well received or poorly received. You have a medium, which is a pathway where the information flows, telephone, written notes, internet, etc. Receiver is the individual groups that receive the information, decode the information, and this is a critical point, because failure to properly decode the message can lead to a misunderstanding, as we saw in the case study at Eastern International. Feedback by receiver informs the sender that the message is understood or that it must be resent. Verbal communication is through words, nonverbal is through body language, for example. Perception is the way we select, organize, and interpret our sensory input it's the process through which people select, organize, and interpret sensory input to give meaning to and order to the world around them. When you see something happen, somebody walks out of a room with a bloody knife and there's a dead body on the ground, what is your perception? That that person is the murderer. It could very well be that that person, that dead body on the ground fell on a knife by accident, was going to bring a knife to the kitchen and fell on it, and here's a shocked person looking at what happened, and he just picks up the knife because he panicked, and he really didn't do anything. But again, human being perceives things. Bias is a systematic tendency to use information about others in ways that can result in inaccurate perceptions, and a stereotype is a bias gone wrong, so to speak, often inaccurate beliefs about the characteristics of particular groups of people. This could lead to racism and can interfere with the encoding and decoding of messages because you're biased, you're not looking at things clearly, and as a result, you don't make a clear and proper decision. Okay, we're almost done here, ladies. Abraham Maslow, here he is. His philosophy: to understand humans, you must understand their highest aspirations. Human study must be humanistic and holistic. Human values are intrinsically good and desirable. Personality problems are what we call loud protests against the crushing of psychological bones. Very nice and poetic. Self-actualizing people can live more freely in the realm of being because they've reached their highest goals. Now they're doing what they always wanted to do. A democratic environment is essential to reach potential. Here's the hierarchy of needs. You have deprivation. Anything at this area, this line, is the line of deprivation. Anything above that is the realm of being. You finally made it, so to speak. Now, physiological needs: your food, your water. Safety needs: you have to feel like you're safe, no one's chasing you, you have a place to live. Love and belongingness: human beings want to be loved and want to belong. If they don't, that means they're socially inept, and socially inept means they're missing something. Esteem needs, right? And once you get past the esteem needs, which straddles the fence between being and deprivation, there's self-actualization, which is being all that you can be. Being all that you can be involves aesthetics, beauty, things of culture, intellectual, and that's the end of the show. Big slideshow. I thank you all, and I wish you all good luck on the Acat exam. Thank you.